Reddit, what is the most eerie thing that's ever happened to you? Sleep paralysis. I've had 2 episodes in my life, but the first one will stick with me forever. My bed was in a corner of my room. My closet was in the opposite corner. No door on the closet, and it was stacked with a ton of junk, community storage for the household as I never used it. I wake up lying on my back, with the door in line of sight. I can see that it's full. But I can also see a hand slide out and grip the door frame. Pale and feminine. Followed by the slowly emerging frame of a very tall woman clad in a white, Victorian-era dress. She was almost pretty, aside from something in her face that wasn't quite right. I couldn't tell you what it was, but I remember being uneasy about it. For a while, probably about 15 minutes, she just stood there, talking to herself. I wasn't able to make out anything she said, but that's when the panic set in. I realized I couldn't move or speak, couldn't look away, and had no idea what was happening, as I felt fully awake. Then she stopped, looked me in the eye and smiled, and the corners of her mouth pulled back to her ears. Terrifying. She started to approach, and slowly opened her mouth so wide, her chin was touching where I'd estimate the bottom of her ribcage sat. It wasn't long before I could smell her rotten breath, and she began to crawl on top of me. The entire time, she was letting out this awful, multi-tone moan that sounded like 5 voices at once, all distorted. I could feel her weight resting on my chest. I couldn't breathe or scream as she inched closer. She put my entire head in her mouth, and I fully woke up when all I could see was darkness. I still get a bit panicky remembering that one. It felt so real. I'm a medic and firefighter. We once had a call for something normal, like chest pain or something, I can't remember. The caller said he was in his barn/garage, which isn't weird really around here. Anyway, we pull up on scene and something just felt off. No idea why, but something just told me in my gut that something was wrong. I decided to do a 360 around the building before we went through the door at the front that was clearly the entrance. I walk around and come to a window on the side of the building and look in. There was a shotgun rigged to the door. The guy had set a booby trap for us. And he had hung himself as well. We kicked in this plexiglass type material on the side of the building and entered that way. Guy was dead. Nothing we could do about it at that point. I would have been the first through that door. No idea why I didn't just walk through it that day. I've posted this before, but I feel it's a decent story. I was a manager of computer repair for a retailer a couple years ago. We had a client's computer in the back running various malware and virus scans. I was doing morning paperwork in the back near the computer. This PC had its screensaver on displaying random photos from the My Pictures folder, various family members, children's birthday parties, the usual stuff. Then from the corner of my eye, I swear to God, I saw a picture of a woman from the shoulders up with her throat cut. As soon as I realized what I was making out, I directed my full attention and it was back to photos of a car show. As the day went on, I thought nothing of it and proceeded to continue my work. Until I was bringing another customer's PC to the back to work on, and again, from my peripheral I could have sworn I saw a bloody body tied up in the trunk of a car. At that moment I began to freak out. I grabbed one of my employees, explained to him the situation. We then sat for 10 minutes and watched this screensaver. It is against company policy to search through the client's personal files without absolute cause. We then proceeded to see a photo of 2 bodies in a shallow grave out in the woods and another photo of a severed hand down in a kitchen drawer. I then went and got the general manager and informed him of the situation and had him view this screensaver. We then felt that it would be in everyone's best interest to contact law enforcement. About 15 minutes later, the owner of the computer and another gentleman show up. I proceed to tell him that his computer is not ready and it will be a while. He then informs me that he was called there because someone reported there was some photographs of a grisly murder that we had found. I showed him his computer and then his partner then begins to laugh at him. Apparently he went against police policy and took some of his work home with him and had never noticed his work photos were being used as a screensaver. I can't know for sure if he was telling the truth, but I like to think so just to put my mind at ease. I was driving home per usual and got this random, unwavering feeling that my house had been broken into. I kind of laughed and said, "Please don't let my house have actually been broken into," out loud as I turned the corner onto my street. The first thing I noticed when I pulled up to the house were the blinds on my bedroom window. They were yanked around and twisted up. Some guy that lives across the street turned out to have been stalking me and decided to climb through my bedroom window. He took nothing valuable. Just some weird personal items. It was terrifying to walk in and see my things rummaged through. It was even scarier when I talked to the neighbor and they admitted that multiple people in the neighborhood had seen it happen, but they were all too scared of the guy to say anything. The weirdest part of it all, And I mean, this guy took some really creepy personal things. Is that nagging feeling I had before I found the remnants of the break-in. I swear I knew before I knew, and that was such an eerie feeling. My husband and I were doing renovations in our house, and we had no window coverings in our front room. The front room was completely gutted and had just a ladder. In the middle of the night, my dogs started barking a warning bark. If you have dogs, you know the bark I'm referring to. Now, I immediately got out of the bed and started to scale the wall to peek downstairs. When I looked around the corner to the front room, I saw someone looking in the large window with a flashlight. My dogs ran to the front door barking. I went into one of the spare bedrooms that looked out over the front yard and saw a cop car. What was odd is that the cop didn't knock or announce himself, so they must have been looking for someone, right? I got my phone and called our local dispatch number and asked if someone had been called out to my area or if there was a search underway, and they said no. I thanked them and hung up. So I wanted to let this cop know that, yes, people lived in what may have looked like an abandoned house, but something just didn't feel right, so I didn't want to open the door. So instead I turned my porch light on and off repeatedly to see what the cop would do. He sprinted to his car and took off. I don't know what he was doing at my house or why he was looking in my windows, but I know he broke protocol by not calling it in, and he was by himself. I told my husband about this, who slept through all of it. He said, it was just a cop. Me, on the other hand, I know something was not right. Thanks, dogs, for letting me know. I work at a hospital and like to take a walk around it before I start work. It is usually dark, and I feel safer walking there. I passed a car, stopped in the middle of the road, and I heard a voice in my head telling me to run. I literally said, I'm not going to run, and I heard it again louder, so I took off running and then heard actual footsteps running behind me. I didn't stop until I got to the street in front of the hospital door. I turned around, and there were two men chasing me. I hate to think what would have happened if I didn't run. I think about that all the time. I have quite a few, but one of the ones from my childhood was a night. I had to be 12 to 15, and was home alone. I was playing on the computer in our den, and directly across from it was the door that went up to the pantry, which had a set of stairs that led to the attic. Suddenly I heard a loud thump, then the repeated thumps as something fell down the stairs. My heart stopped because there was a door at the top of the stairs that shouldn't have allowed anything to do so. I remember getting up and walking over to the door but being unable to touch the knob. Then the sound of pacing started above me. Slowly walking backwards, I returned to the den and curled up in a ball on the couch staring at that door as the sound of a thump followed by the sound of something following down the stairs happened again. This continued on for hours till shortly before my parents got home it stopped and never happened again. My dad went up after they got home and confirmed nothing was moved or anything, but I hated being alone at night after this. This was the same house. I wouldn't shower if nobody was home either though. It was just a bit odd. The one we moved into after this one was worse though. So a few of you asked for other stories and I figured I'd offer them here. Since it was asked more than once though, I'll start by explaining why I never showered there alone. We lived in a very old house, and in the bathroom were two older medicine cabinets. They were the type you pushed closed and they'd latch. They were a nightmare to open and you had to really pull on them. They would not open on their own. I can promise that. One night when I was 12-13, I went to shower while home alone, and as routine went, I always pushed them tightly closed. I, to this day, hate mirrors facing me, and then hopped in the shower. I'd only been in for a few minutes when the sound of creaking hit me over the sound of the water. I peeked out and one of the cabinets had opened and the mirror was now facing me. In it, I saw a dark shadowed man's face. I screamed, hopped out and grabbed my towel, then sat in the living room, shaking, till my parents came home. They naturally denied it and said I had probably imagined it, but I knew what I saw. I never showered alone there again. Shortly before I turned 16, we moved into a basement apartment. Really old and creepy as hell. I hated living there and never was comfortable. One of the first nights there, I was in my bedroom, supposed to be asleep. There were those rolling doors on the closet and I had closed them. Just like mirrors, closets are not a favorite thing. Then one side started to slowly creak open. I was horror-struck and stayed completely still as a hand, on my door, pushed it open. There was no obvious person. Just the hand and a black shadow in the corner of it. This was the same house where, semi-routinely, things would move when we hadn't touched them. Shadows rarely seemed like just shadows, and I would often wake to see a man standing in the doorway of whatever room we were in. We also fostered kittens there, and they'd suddenly stop and watch things that weren't there, their little heads moving to follow unseen movements. This happened in the early to mid-70s to a female teacher of mine. We'll call her Sandy. She was house sitting for a couple who were out of town for a few months. It was an old 3-story house the couple had restored. It was a dark night and it was raining outside. Sandy was watching TV, but she kept feeling uneasy. She felt like someone was watching her. Over and over again she'd look around and see nothing, but the feeling wouldn't go away. Finally, she firmly decided that she was just being silly and started ignoring the feeling. That's when the man attacked her. Sandy struggled with him, pushed him down and grabbed an old heavy antique table lamp. As he came back at her, she swung the lamp hard with both hands and cracked him right in the head with it. He dropped unconscious and bleeding. She called the cops. He ended up in prison and physically messed up for the rest of his life. Sandy was a teacher and a tennis coach. I imagine it was the most satisfying swing of her life. So, it happened when I was quite young, maybe around the age of 7 up until the age of 13. But, essentially, I'd regularly hear footsteps running back and forth up and down the hallway at certain times during the night. It was unnerving, but I didn't feel threatened by it, if that makes sense. I'd gotten used to it, but then something changed, where if I was sitting in the living room alone, this usually happened during the daytime. There would be footsteps again, this time much slower, and I'd feel something watching me from the door frame. And I'd look back over the sofa and I knew something was there. It felt like something was checking on me. Again, not that I felt scared. It felt comforting weirdly enough, but it went on for a good few years whenever I was alone in the living room chilling. Another example too was when I was around the age of 15. It was the middle of June, and I had my night light on. I think it was around 10 p.m. My bed was in the middle of the room, just a bit away from my bedroom door, and my door was always left a little ajar with the hallway light still on. And initially I thought I had sleep paralysis, but I could still move, and I heard something whispering loudly right next to my ear, and it was saying my name repeatedly. And it didn't stop, like it felt like it was pressed up right against my left ear, saying it in this deep voice. And I was genuinely terrified because I didn't know what the hell it was, and I remember covering my ears, but it got so loud I started screaming hysterically for my mom. I've never been in so much fear like that since then, and that continued for the next 2 years. Initially in my bedroom and then around the house, and I'd lock myself in the bathroom, the only room with a lock, waiting for my mom to come back from work because I could hear it in the other rooms. I'd put earphones in and it would muffle it somewhat. And then eventually outside of the house to some capacity. It became like a mumbling, and less like my name over time. My mom is one of those psychically sensitive people. We've had a few incidents, with a couple of standouts. One morning as I was getting ready to go to school, my mom asks me what I was looking for in her bedroom last night. Nothing. Why? You were looking for something in that box at the foot of the bed in the middle of the night. I felt you sit on the bed and go through it very quietly. It was around midnight. Nope, not me. I was in high school and we lived alone. Never been a sleepwalker. A few minutes later, the phone rings. Her best friend had passed away that night. My mom went to the box in her room, and on top of the pile of stuff in it was a beautiful scarf this friend had gifted her years ago. Another one, a few years later, we moved into a new apartment. The day we moved in, my mom goes, "Someone passed away here." I was like, okay, I don't need this right now. Fast forward a few days, she blurts out, "It was a woman." Few weeks later, she says, "It was in this side of the house. The side my room was in." I had it at that point. I called Claudio, our landlord. "Hey man, got a strange question for you. Anybody die here? My mom is driving me crazy, you know how Latina moms are." He was Argentinian, we're Venezuelan. "Nah man, not that I know of." We laughed it off. It was a fairly new apartment, so I left it at that. Some time later, I get a call from Claudio, so I called the guy I bought the apartment from. His wife passed away there, from a heart attack. I never saw anything, until next Christmas Eve. My mom, a friend of mine who was in town that we invited over, and I are in the living room having dinner at the table. All of a sudden we all stopped talking and eating and looked at each other. "Did you see what I just saw?" "I just saw someone walk across the living room towards the bedroom." "Yeah, me too." "Are you sure?" "Yep. All three of us saw her." My friend didn't know about the backstory and we told him then. We had a good laugh. Last one. Same apartment. My mom had moved out to her own place. I was 20 at the time. It was about 2 a.m. I was learning how to code and was going through a phase of being up all night studying and experimenting. My desk was in the living room, and the whole room was pitch dark except for the glow of the monitor. I was alone at the apt. My mind was fully immersed in what I was doing. All of a sudden my awareness was pulled out of the computer, and I got this intense sensation that someone was standing directly behind me. I'd never been so spooked in my life. I froze for a few seconds, and slowly pushed the keyboard in. Without looking back, I got up and quickly shimmied out of the apartment. I walked to the nearest bar, had a bunch of drinks and came back to the apartment to pass out drunk. Moved out a few weeks later. Was around 18 at the time. Home alone as usual. I was dancing and jamming going from my bedroom to the dining room. As I reach a corner of the wall, in the corner of my eye I see something black. I turn my head and all my body froze in place. A shadow of a man on the wall, not mine. I stared in disbelief as the shadow walked off 3 seconds later. I ran to the kitchen to grab a knife. I started yelling, "I know you are here. Please leave. This is not your house. We have nothing of value." I went to every room of the house and never found anyone. The house was too silent. If it was really someone, it would have had to go past me at some point to leave my house. My dogs are really protected pit bulls and they never barked once, surprisingly. Till this day, I don't know what or who that shadow was, but it really creeps me out. I was working at a juice bar, bending down behind the counter to get something when the door opens and a customer walks in. I stand up to greet them and immediately get a cold rush of abject horror upon seeing the man. I don't know why. There was nothing unusual about his appearance. He was just a middle-aged white dude who smiled pleasantly. We made small talk as he placed his order. But the whole time my stomach was lurching and my mind was like, this guy is a serial killer and he has a girl chained up in his basement somewhere. As I was preparing his order, he started walking around the counter and looking behind it. At one point he asked if he could come back there. I was like, no, it's not for customers. Then he took his order and left. Nothing crazy. Just the intense rush of fear I experienced upon standing up and seeing him. My instincts telling me he's bad news. That's the only time in my life I've ever experienced that. I worked at a nuclear weapons storage depot in the Nevada desert outside Nellis AFB for 6 years. It's now shut down. When people say UFOs are attracted to nukes, they are telling the truth. But so much more goes on. My first night there I witnessed a ball of light trigger sensor on fence line, prompting a security response. The ball got chased by 3 patrols as it flew directly above the fence line before finally taking a sharp turn out into the desert. We discovered 3 mutilated donkeys across a span of 2 weeks, all about a mile from each other and seemingly dropped off out of nowhere. No tracks in or out. Various organs removed from each, no blood anywhere, no rips in the flesh, they were all cuts. Scavengers didn't even touch the bodies. I witnessed a figure atop a roof of a structure just 30 meters from me and 14 other personnel. It was just standing there watching us. I took a spotlight and shined it up there, and as soon as the light hit the figure it disappeared. We all saw it happen. I heard a man laughing maniacally once, nothing there. Sweep with night vision and thermals revealed nothing, 3 other witnesses. We wrote it off as the Laughing Colonel, an urban legend passed down by the security personnel for ages. While on patrol in adjoining conventional weapons storage area, me and partner parked next to a hot pad loaded with 500 pounds bombs about to be shipped overseas. Heard a soft cooing sound coming from the pad. Me and partner did a security sweep of the pad and the cooing kept happening and seemingly luring us past the pad and into the pitch black desert. Night vision and thermals revealed nothing. We did not pursue, just did another sweep of the pad and moved along. While on training exercise, our machine gun overwatch team spotted 2 figures on thermals in desert behind us. Exercise was immediately canceled when Security 1 said he didn't place any bad guys out there. Everyone locked and loaded, set up a sweep. The overwatch team observed the figures going prone and backing away from our sweep element, then disappear when we got close. Our thermals confirmed trace heat on ground despite us doing the sweep never seeing anything. Weirdest event was when I was exterior patrol, outside the fence line. Got called to respond to a truck approaching on side of mountain nearby. Not unusual, most people didn't know we're out there and we got off radars all the time we'd scare the shit out of. Visually confirmed truck on NVGs, then suddenly the headlights disappear. We believe they've turned them off and are now approaching on foot, so call for K9 and move to blocking position where I know anyone will have to cross past us to approach perimeter. We are there for about 10 minutes when 1 by 1 patrol members overwatching us from high points on the inside call in lights appearing at our 12, 3, and 9 o'clock in effect flanking us, with fence line about 300 meters behind us. We see and hear nothing, not even on NVGs or thermals. Dog never reacts. Suddenly panicked patrol calls in that the lights are rushing us. We are already locked and loaded. I tell my partner to put a grenade in the tube. Nothing happens, dog never indicates. Our radios die and after 10 minutes we hike back to fence line only to discover we were out of contact for twice as long as I thought we were. Very paraphrased event cuz on phone, but our radios only started working when we were back at fence line. There's more, but these were the highlights or events I'm allowed to speak about. The world is not as normal as you believe it is. If you guys like this video, please drop a like and subscribe, and also check out my Instagram account Scary Time that is linked in the description, and as always, stay scary.